was that change that happened in our household, and that belief that my mum and dad started instilling in us, that we could really do anything, and that we were gifted and we carried the image of God, and we were, all of those messages really went in deep.
Hello and welcome to The Way. I'm Wendy Grace. We're going to be joined in studio by someone who's going to share with us a little bit about his faith and his life, where God has been an influence in his life. And probably for a lot of people watching, they think, I wouldn't have automatically thought if I read this person's biography that they would be a really strong and passionate Christian, because my next guest is an assistant professor at the Centre for Astrophysics and Relativity in the School of Mathematical Sciences in Dublin City University. He has an incredible educational history because he has a master's in theoretical physics from Cambridge University and also spent time in New York as a research fellow at Cornell University. That's just some of his academic history. So I think if I gave you that info on paper and said, do you want to guess what I'm going to talk to this next guest about? You might say, I definitely didn't think it was going to be about his faith in God and his journey in the Christian faith. But that is exactly what we're going to talk about today with Dr. Peter Taylor. It's great to have you with us, Peter.
Pleasure being here.
That's the first thing I think people will find really interesting is if you said to somebody, okay, describe a Christian and some of their attributes or their personality type or the type of career they might have.
Yeah.
Probably your field of sciences isn't something people would write on top of their list.
Yeah, probably not. Yeah. There's more of us than you might think, though.
Yeah. We'll come forwards surely, but let's go back first. I presume kind of an intellectual curiosity, interest in sciences, that kind of maths side of your brain was something that probably developed quite early on. Did that create barriers to your faith, or where did faith kind of begin in your life?
Yeah, faith began I kind of grew up in a Christian home from an early age. When I was about 6 years old, my mum was kind of radically converted, I would say. She had met an elderly couple who'd shared the Christian faith with her. My mum came from a very difficult background, in a very poor background, and a very abusive father, an alcoholic father who also died young. So a lot of trauma, and just lived life out on the roads basically. And she encountered this couple who just shared the love of God with her, and it just had this huge impact on her. But then she kind of went off and did her own thing for a while. Had kids. She had kids very young.
The seed was planted.
The seed was planted. Yeah. And then she'd kind of went off and kind of lived her life. And she had 4 young kids by the time she was 22, I think, 23. So, pretty hectic household. We lived in a pretty rough area in Bray. And she was just trying to cope there with...
Trying to survive.
Trying to
like
survive,
so many,
yeah. It was really survival, yeah. And then on Christmas Day, I think it was, one year when I was about 6, there was a house across the road from ours that went up in flames, and everyone in that family died except for the dad and the eldest son, including my best friend at the time. Would you believe he gave me this scar here between my 2 eyes, if you can see that, by accident. He gave it to me by accident, but it was a real tragedy in the area, and it just deeply affected my mum, like really deeply affected her. And I think after that she couldn't escape the question of there has to be more to life than this. I think that was the resounding question in her spirit at that time, in her soul at that time, is surely there has to be more to life than this. Like what happens after we die? And that's the question that everybody has to face at some point. Like, what happens after we die? And she had, because of that question that was going on in her mind, she had started to explore faiths again a little bit. not particularly Christian faith.
She was just searching.
She was just searching, yeah. And she was walking past a coffee shop down in Bray one afternoon soon afterwards. All these questions going on in her brain, and she decided to pop in for a cup of coffee, not realizing that this coffee shop was actually a little charity coffee shop run by that elderly couple who had
planted that seed all those years ago.
seed when she was a teenager all those years ago.
Wow.
So she started going to church with them, and just became a Christian, and her life was just absolutely transformed.
Can you remember that change? Because you were so young.
Yeah, I think I actually do remember, not specifically. I don't specifically remember any changes in as an explicit confession of faith or anything like that. But I remember our house going from chaos to order, and that was the big thing that I remember. I remember all of a sudden our household wasn't as chaotic anymore. And my mum stopped smoking and she stopped drinking.
Kind of peace
immediately. Yeah. There was like a real peace in the house. Big changes in my parents, like really big changes, and then they started speaking to us differently. Like out of nowhere, the messages started to sound like you can do anything in life. It went from kind of being chaos to, there's great potential in you. You can do anything in life. Like God has put amazing gifts in you. You can do anything in life. And this was the message I grew up hearing. Like I could do anything. Like I'm even though we grew up in this tiny little terrace house in this council estate in one of the roughest parts of Bray, my mum just kept telling us, you can do anything in life. And that was really embedded. That idea that actually, you know what, there's gifts in me that God has put there, and I should try to do something with them. So I was very God conscious from that point on. So we would go along to church with my mum, and yes, definitely became very God conscious. I wasn't. I mean, one of the differences I think with Christianity, maybe to some other faith systems, is you're not really born into it in a certain sense. You have to make the decision for yourself. Like at some point, you have to decide.
Yeah, you get to a crossroads, and there is a point, and the psychotherapist would say there's a particular point. It's different ages for different children, right? But there's a time where you take what your parents say and you just absorb that.
Exactly.
And then there's a crossroads where you start to think about the world and what do I want to be? When did that hit you?
Yeah, that was exactly that. You articulated that really well. Yeah. So when I was a teenager, I came to exactly that crossroads where I grew up God conscious. I would even say God fearing in an appropriate sense. But I had all these intellectual questions, and some of them being intellectual obstacles, because I was very good in school. I was very into science and maths, and when you are into those fields, you definitely hear a lot of messages that seem to go against the grain of your faith. And so I had all of these obstacles that I was wrestling with, and I wasn't sure what direction I was going to go in. And then apart from that, I had all these social pressures as well. Part of me, as a young teenage boy, part of me just wanted to do my own thing and not be bound by, the countercultural ways of Christianity. I just, I wanted to go out to the clubs, and I wanted to chase girls, and I wanted to play football, and I wanted to do all the things that young boys like to do. And so that was part of it as well, of course.
It's a very strong pull.
It is a very strong pull, yeah. And now, thankfully, I loved sport, and I grew up in a big boxing household, and so nobody in our household drank as a result of that. So that pull wasn't there for me, thankfully. But most of the other social pressures had a pull on me.
Isn't it interesting that can be the thing that pushes us away from faith? It's not the intellectual or scientific, it's actually the cultural and the pull of the peer pressure and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and I think sometimes probably that's bigger than we'd like to admit, and then we can justify it with the intellectual obstacles. So all of these things are working in a very complex way inside of you.
Were you asking questions to your mum then?
Yeah, asking big questions, yeah. So she was, I think, the spiritual leader in our home, and I was bringing all these obstacles to her, these intellectual obstacles in particular. And you know, she left school when she was very, very young, and so she didn't have the answers really. She had the scriptural answers, but I was looking for answers from, you know, credible scientific sources, and she didn't have those. But she had a lot of wisdom, so she did the next best thing, which was she went out and she found out who those credible scientific sources were, and she went and bought me loads of books, and I began devouring these books. You know, books by people like C.S. Lewis, who was one of the great apologists, Christian apologists, and was I think a lot of the books I read at those times really helped dismantle a lot of the intellectual obstacles that I was facing. Not all of them, but most of them. And then through my own journey over the years, kind of formulated a lot of my own arguments and a lot of my own ways of thinking about these things from my own experience in the sciences.
What was it like then when you started to study? Because a lot of people would say once you leave school and entering college, that's another time where there's so much social and cultural pressure.
Yeah,
If you had all of that, but on top of that, you're studying the sciences where I imagine there's a pressure to
yeah,
not hold a belief in God, again, based on the kind of cultural pressure.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you had it coming at you from a few different angles.
That's right. Yeah, and in fact, university is a place that's particularly hostile to faith, and you know, most of your professors, no, well, maybe not most, but many of your professors will be very explicit about their hostility towards faith, and so that is hard because this is the person you see as the authority.
How did you navigate that?
Uh, Again, I think I was pretty good at finding sources and finding books and trying to be honest and trying to, um, you know, if people said things to me that made sense but went against the grain of my faith, I would consider it and I would try to think about it and I would try to wrestle with it and I would try to find books that talked about it, and I was just intellectually curious, and I think the honest thing to do and the right thing to do is to wrestle with it.
And to follow that curiosity
Yeah,
rather than
to
just
follow it.
kind of, there isn't enough evidence for me, move on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I was reasonably good at that, at trying to wrestle with the various perspectives, and and oftentimes came out neither on that side or that side on some topics, and but came out with a different perspective that might be slightly unorthodox. And you see this with a lot of the scientists who happen to be theists or happen to be Christian. They often have slightly unorthodox views in one area or another, but I think it's because they're really wrestling with the topic.
There isn't a kind of full stop in their journey, I suppose.
Yeah.
Did you have any of those moments, Peter, where you're having a conversation with colleagues or people you're studying with or whatever, where there's an attack going against, you know, someone who believes in God, and you're kind of going, well, I do actually.
Not explicitly that, because it wouldn't usually happen in the classroom, I guess,
Yeah.
or in a lecture theatre. But when I was in Cambridge, I encountered many people there who were dumbfounded, I would say, to the point of ridicule at the fact that I was a Christian.
How did you handle that?
I mean, all you can do is present your case, right? I mean, I mean, I don't think I wasn't offended, and I think you'd kind of get used to it in some sense. But yeah, I definitely encountered people who were at least a couple of people who were just like, I can't fathom any intelligent person being a Christian, and you know, the conclusion being I must not be an intelligent person. So I definitely encountered people like that. Of course you do, in these circles. But yeah, you just have to be gracious and.
Not easy though, I'd say. How would you respond to that, or did that help build your faith or strengthen your faith when you were having to answer that question? Well, you know, what is it that makes you believe in God?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. You try to use it as an opportunity. Like, I remember one particular person who happened to be doing her PhD in evolutionary biology, and I was there doing my master's in theoretical physics, and she just could not fathom the fact that I could believe in God, and you know, so it started out with ridicule. But I mean, it ended probably in a reasonable conversation. You know, I can't say I convinced her, but I certainly presented my case, and she presented hers, and that's the way it goes. I mean, you have to be open to dialogue, and you have to be open to polite dialogue. And I think ridicule is certainly not the way to go. And I know there's some atheists who actually advocate for ridicule. Hitchens being was it Dawkins, maybe? That was Dawkins, I think, who actually advocated for the ridicule of Christians. And that can't be it.
It's pretty low bar if you're trying to have a proper discussion with someone, isn't it?
No, I mean, you can't claim to be intellectually honest, I don't think, and suggest that the way to have dialogue with people who don't agree with you is ridicule.
So there's that side where, as you're studying, and I'm sure this is ongoing, you're having these conversations where it's probably more of the intellectual discussions, but I'm sure running alongside that was your own personal experience, your own personal relationship
Yeah.
with God. Was there, moments of just experiencing that relationship where you felt this is very real to me?
Yeah, absolutely. There has been several moments down through the years, and they're much more important to me than the intellectual journey, I would say. Um, for the intellectual journey, for me, was almost removing barriers that allowed me to step in fully
To
to
have
my
the
faith.
relationship, yeah.
Exactly. But then once there, of course, it's almost you are essentially in relationship at that point with God, and that comes with the kinds of encounters that any relationship comes with, in the sense of very real encounters. I do remember probably the most profound and significant one I had was, I was probably about 19, maybe 20, maybe, and there was a very well-known what we call pastor from New York, David Wilkerson, who's now passed away. And some people might know him because he was famously wrote The Cross and the Switchblade. And
Very good book.
yeah, amazing book. And also founded a very well-known church in New York called Times Square Church. And he was speaking here in Kildare in Ireland. I can't remember the exact year, but I went along to it, and I just remember encountering the presence of God there like I'd never encountered it before. And it was such a significant time for me because I was still kind of in that place of wrestling.
You were one foot in, one foot out.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of more in than out at that point, but I was struggling a little bit in college because I was getting drawn into certain crowds in college. Like, a lot of my friends in college were, really well-known socialites, and they were really getting on in that field of, being, models and social media
Wooed
stars.
by
And
the superficial.
yeah, and I was kind of like, half being wooed by just the glamour of that world. And I don't know, I just went along to this, and I just remember, yeah, it's kind of one of those experiences. It's kind of hard to articulate, but I just remember the reality of God's love and his plan for my life being so immediate and maybe even urgent. And that was such an important moment, I think, for me, and fueled me for many years thereafter, I would say.
Did it make you, is that a moment where you change things in your life, or did it just solidify
Yeah.
continuing on that path of belief?
No, I had a pretty dramatic change after that, actually. Yeah. I would say that was the moment where all aspects of my life kind of got refined in a certain sense. So, like, I found myself withdrawing from certain ambitions, especially those ones that were superficial. And I felt like that was the seed of an actual real transformation. And
Were
I
you
think,
happier then?
say again,
Were you happier then?
was I happier then?
Yeah, when you made that choice, because
Oh yeah. No, definitely. I think I was doing very well in college socially, but I felt it was all very vacuous and empty. I certainly wasn't happy, and I knew there was more, because like I said, I was very God conscious, and I don't know. Yeah, there was something about that moment and the transformation that followed, and I think the people who knew me then wouldn't have recognized me 5 years later, if I'm being honest.
What were
So
the changes?
I just wasn't the same person. I was no longer interested in all of those superficial things, and I my ambitions had completely changed. I didn't want to be famous. I didn't want to have a name for myself. I just wanted what God's plan for my life was, and I wanted I wanted a family. Strangely enough, like I got married very young. Like the idea of me doing that at that time when I was 19, the idea that I would be 4 years later I would be married, it just seemed crazy to
When you'd
me.
been in that kind of socialite,
Yeah,
outside
yeah,
circle,
yeah.
yeah.
And yeah, and I was in with all the like that was I actually met just passed away this week. I met Julian Benson at that time, and I was friends with him at that time, and all of the social circles that he was involved in, all of the modeling and all of the stuff that people were involved in. All my friends were involved in UCD, and I was on the verge of kind of going all into that,
Yeah.
and then like it was like in a moment I just completely stepped out of it.
Which is, again, if you were to put it on paper, right? Sometimes having a Christian faith is wrongly seen as it's a whole load of no's, and oh, poor Peter, he was a socialite and he was really popular and he was out on the town having a great time, and then he had to ditch all that. And
No,
it's
no,
seen as a kind of
yeah,
negative, as a
yeah, yeah.
whole load of no's, but really it's, again, when you actually interrogate it, isn't it taking the shackles off in a way?
No, I've definitely, because I felt more free than I'd ever felt. Especially that kind of one of the things I think that comes with not just that world, but I think that comes oftentimes uh, with a life without faith in God, is you tend to carry a lot of fear of man. You tend to carry um, you tend to carry a burden to be someone, like, but in a superficial
And you're
sense.
trying to prove yourself
Yeah, you always
to
always feel like
other
you're trying to
people.
prove yourself. Yeah, and I think when you really know who you are in God, that weight just kind of comes off you, and you're like, okay, there's actually more to life than this. Like my worth is not wrapped up in trying to be someone. It's not wrapped up in trying to be a success in that field or that field. Yes, God has given me gifts, and I'm gonna pursue them to the uttermost for His sake, because He's given them to me.
But that's not what your values
But it's
reliant
not,
on.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, and it's a completely different perspective. It's a much more freeing perspective, and yeah, it comes with a great weight lifted off, and a great freedom, in fact, and a much deeper sense of fulfillment. And as it turns out, with God's help, I went on to do lots of things that I never would have thought I'd have been able to do otherwise. Um, like going to Cambridge to do my master's. Like, I mean, when I think back of my childhood and my journey, and I think back of think about my background and where my parents came from,
Yeah,
both of
if
them.
people had said you're going to be a professor and you'll study in America and the UK,
Yeah,
and where your studies would take you, you probably would have said, "Really?"
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it really has been an amazing journey.
Does that go back to your mom instilling that innate value when she really came to know God? Of, you have gifts, God has a plan for you, that you
Yeah,
believe, that you took that on board.
yeah. That's. I really think that has been a huge part of it. And like I said, we came from this really small terrace house in this council estate, which, and in a time, like, we grew up in the 80s and early 90s, at a time where that particular area was going through a heroin epidemic. I mean, it's just like dreadful. It was people dying of overdoses, like, all the time. A lot of poverty, a lot of oppression, and neither of my parents came from. They both left school when they were very young, so there's no academic history in our family at all. No academic heritage. And in that context, I get to go to Cambridge, and I
You were
study
gifted
under.
with that mind, so
I didn't know I was, strange
yeah.
enough, and the reason I didn't know I was is because there was no academic heritage. There was
No
nobody
one
in
to
my
look
family
to.
that was
Yeah.
able to kind of go, oh, he's actually a gifted mathematician. It was only when so I won our national science exhibition. I won the Young Scientist in 2001. That was for me the first moment where I realized, oh, actually, I might actually have a gift for this. maybe I should start pursuing this.
Yeah.
And so that was a big moment for me, and a big, I guess, crystallizer in my journey. Um, but yeah, apart from that, I wouldn't have known. But I really do think it was that change that happened in our household, and that belief that my mum and dad started instilling in us, that we could really do anything, and that we were gifted and we carried the image of God, and we were, all of those messages uh, really went in deep, I think. And as you well know, I'm not the most successful in my family. I have my younger sister is Katie Taylor, the very famous, world
She got
famous.
the famous bit that you thought you wanted.
Yeah, she got the famous bit. But it's the same deal with her journey. I mean, if she was sitting here, she would tell you the same thing, that it was that transformation that happened in our household. That was that sense of my mum, constantly saying to her, you can do anything that you want to. Like, if that's what you want to do, you can pursue that. God has put that gift in you. Pursue it. And this was our journey as a family.
Isn't that in itself an amazing kind of proof of God, that given what you've told us about your upbringing, where you lived, all that sort of stuff, you end up in the field of sciences, the studies that you've done, and your sister totally in the field of sport. They're so different.
Yeah.
And just going back to that belief in yourself, in what the gifts God has given you, that it just shows the journey, the plan He has for your life is so different for all of us.
Yeah, exactly.
And it plays out in different ways.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's so unique because He's personal.
Yeah.
And I really do think it was actually God coming into our household, coming into our family, and that really made a difference for us. And my mum used to always say to us, it's not where you live, it's how you live. And she used to really try to instill, the way I like to say it now is the royal ways of the kingdom in us. She kind of raised us like we were children of royalty, and in a very real sense we were.
Yeah.
Because that's essentially children of God, essentially what it means, right? So we grew up believing that, and we grew up with that kind of belief that we really could do.
I think there's a few things that are really important for people to take, is that for those who have a strong faith watching, never forget the impact sowing that little seed can have. That couple that your mom met,
amazing,
and how you mightn't get to meet them again like your mom did, and instilling the values in your children. But just finally wanted to ask you, Peter, hard to sum up, but it is a big question. How does faith in God make your life better? Does it make it better? Does it make it more fulfilling? Does it bring you joy?
It definitely brings me joy. Yeah, it makes me. I have a very fulfilled life, and now at this stage of my life, I'm very involved in church life as well, and in Bible teaching, and I'm on the board of a large church as well in Dublin. So, I mean, I feel like my whole life really centers around the gospel in some sense, and even the work I do in university, for me, it feels like an extension of the gift God put in me. So it's almost hard for me to articulate. It's hard for me to articulate God as an add-on to my life, adding value to my life.
Yeah,
rather
so
than being, rather than being my very raison d'etre. It really is. It's almost I live my whole life out of that perspective, rather than it being an added value to my life. To be honest with you, but I live a very fulfilling life, a very joyful life. I've got three beautiful daughters, beautiful wife. We have a lovely home and a job that I love to do. It doesn't even feel like work to me. And for me, I have a deep sense of indebtedness to God for that journey, and I feel like it's something I truly didn't deserve, but the goodness of God.
Yeah, and here you are today, sharing with us.
Here I am.
It's been lovely to chat to you. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit of your story, and sharing about your faith and your life as well. Dr. Peter Taylor, thank you for being with us on The Way, and thank you for being with us as well.